our second day, right?
It is.
Do you know what's so funny about the first day? Like we came here early before you came.
Mhm.
And then there was this instructor, I don't know what's his name. And then we came in, I thought he was the instructor. I just
Oh.
came in like, it's like, this is my class. Like I just came in and I sat. And he's like, welcome, thank you for joining us. We're actually just ripping out like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead and walk up. He's like, no, just go ahead and sit down. So when you came in, we're like sitting here like as if we were in his class. That was so funny.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like mentally getting the schedule and time for
Yeah.
everything. It's like you reset the board every time. Yeah. That's pretty good. Yeah, you too. Okay, good afternoon and welcome back. Let's go ahead and get rolling. I hope your week has been going well so far, and we've been enjoying the weirdly nice weather for January. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to check in first. Is there anybody that's here for the first time today? I believe everybody here is returning. Okay, great. So we have a really nice set of people. We have kind of in the like 12 to 15 range on any given day, which means we'll be able to do a lot of small group activities where we split up in groups of 2, groups of 3, even a couple of things that we might be doing as whole class. So I'm looking forward to that, and I think it'll be a fun way for us to explore dynamics of small group communication, right? That's what the class is about, but that's also what we get to do very practically as the term continues. So we had the chance to get to know each other better last class. We also took some time to talk about small group communication, why it matters, why it's important, why we should pursue it. And we took some time to go over course syllabus and some major things to know related to the course. So I just wanted to refresh on a couple major things to know as we move forward, right? As we've discussed, small group communication is generally between 3 to 8 people, sometimes up to a dozen or so, and they share something in common. Perhaps it's similar members of a culture or group, perhaps it's sharing in the practice of a language, or perhaps it's like us, who all are in Eastern Oregon, right? And the ability to engage effectively in groups is incredibly important. Effective small group communication can produce the idea of synergy, right? A group being more than the sum of its parts, of people being able to share, bounce off ideas with each other, and bring things to the table that they would not have been able to come up with on their own. And it's dynamic, and the high highs of effective small group communication can really help the group work efficiently. But we also know that it's got some low lows, people who are arguing, who are aggressive, people who goof off and don't get anything done, right? We know that small group communication can really run those extremes. So when we think about the groups that we're a part of, maybe it's extracurriculars or groups like study groups that we have on campus, right? We're actively involved in collaborating in these groups. And we know that these are practical skills too, right? Our ability to work professionally, perhaps in a Google meeting or Zoom meeting on a team, or perhaps we're on the ground, being healthcare workers, firefighters, law enforcement officers, you name it, right? We might be in charge of trying to manage and work effectively in groups to build out those skills. How many people have either read the play or saw the film 12 Angry Men before? Okay, a couple of you. How many of you have heard of it? Okay, so a few of you. So 12 Angry Men is a rather famous stage adaptation. It's had numerous film and stage productions over the years, right? And the premise of 12 Angry Men is simple. There is a murder trial, right? And there is a suspect who it appears is very clearly guilty and committed a murder. There's a witness, there's a knife that was found at the scene of the crime, and so on. So the 12 jurors are tasked with coming to reach a verdict, right? And the entire production or film is these 12 jurors talking with each other, right? Is doing small group communication. And over the course of this production, they start by having 11-to-1 guilty to not guilty. There's only one person who says, hey, I don't think we should rush to a guilty verdict. We need some time to think about this and look at the evidence a little bit more. By the end, spoiler alert, they all turn around and unanimously agree to a not guilty verdict, right? So the entire film is a case study in small group communication, of the ways that it works, of the ways that it doesn't work, and of the ways we can analyze how people communicate in these group settings toward change. So there are some components of this, right? This older production came out in the 1950s. Some of the depictions and discussion about things like gender are a bit outdated, but I do think that the insights that this has in regards to how small groups can effectively work together, I think can be really valuable for us to look at. So as you're watching this clip, I want you to pay attention to some of the ways that the group members can build off of an idea and build a better understanding of an issue in a way that they would not have been able to if they were on their own.
Now, why were you rubbing your nose like that? Well, if it's any of your business, I was rubbing it because it bothered me. Oh, I'm sorry. Is it because of your eyeglasses? It is. Now can we get on to something else? Your eyeglasses made those two deep impressions on the side of your nose. I hadn't noticed that before. That must be annoying. It is very annoying. I wouldn't know about that. I've never worn my glasses. 2020. Listen, will you come on already with the apologist bit? The woman who testified that she saw the killing had those same marks on the sides of her nose. Give me a minute. Now be finished. I don't know if anyone else knows how a daughter. I didn't think of a thing, but I've been going over her face in my mind. She had those same marks. She kept rubbing them in court. She's right. She did do that a lot. This woman was about 45 years old. She's making a tremendous effort to look 35 for her first public appearance. Heavy makeup, dyed hair, brand new clothes that should have been worn by a young woman. No glasses. The women do that. See if you can get a mental picture of it.
What do you mean, no glasses? How do you know whether she wore glasses? Just because she was rubbing her nose? Now, she had those marks. I saw. Well, so what? What do you think that means? Listen, I'm getting so sick of your yelling. Hey, listen. Listen, he's right. I saw them, too. I was the close one, too. She had these things on the side of her nose. What do you call it? On the side. Well, what point are you making here? She had dyed hair, marks on her nose. Well, what does that mean?
Could those marks be made by anything other than eyeglasses?
No, they couldn't. I didn't see any marks. I didn't. Strange, but I didn't think about it before. What about the lawyer? Why didn't he say something?
There are 12 people in here concentrating on this case. 11 left
didn't think of it either. But what about the district attorney? You think he'd pull a trick like that? Have her testify without her glasses?
You ever see a woman who had to wear glasses and didn't want to because she thinks they spoil her looks?
Okay, she had marks on her nose. I'm giving you that.
Right, so, again, older, outdated, in a lot of ways, but, and forgive me for adjusting the volume, they are 12 Angry Men. So I think this provides a really good example here of some of the ways that small group communication can be used effectively, right? So there is this breakthrough that happens in the case where there's this witness, this woman who's come forward and said that she saw the murder, right? But they start to realize, this one juror points out that there's the marks by her eyes, and they realize that she was wearing glasses normally, but was not wearing glasses at the time that she saw the crime take place, which throws the entire case on its head and helps us realize that perhaps she didn't see and was not a reliable witness to the murder itself, right? Which drastically changes their understanding of the case. So we have the juror who's coming forward and starting to realize that. We have other jurors who are corroborating the story, realizing that yes, she did have these marks. We have jurors starting to talk about why she might not have worn glasses and what it means for the trial as a whole, right? They're able to come together and reach a conclusion about this that they would not have been able to do if they were just working alone. So again, I think a good example here of how successful collaboration can happen in a group setting and be more than the sum of its parts. For today, we're going to be looking at some of the stages of small group communication, some types of groups and some of the roles that we might take on in groups, and some of the patterns that we might have as members of the group. We'll be doing an activity where I'll be asking you to think about yourself and how you participate in a lot of group settings, and also things that you can continue to work on as you collaborate and work in groups too. Just as a quick note, just to remind you for this course, I do have the main page of the course that lists both the date, the material for that day, right? So I post the slides before class starts. And then I also post things that are due for that week. Remember, there's no textbook that you need to buy for the course. Instead, the week's readings are divided up here and available for you to access as a PDF. This first week's quiz is due this Sunday, and half of it is from the syllabus, and the other half is from this first week of readings. So I recommend taking a stab at that and finishing that before the end of the week. Remember as well, my office hours, 10 to 11:45, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or by appointment. You're welcome to click this link if you decide you'd like to join through Zoom, since I have it simultaneous, face-to-face, and through Zoom. And again, all of this information is available for your review in terms of course policies and other things on the syllabus. And I recommend that you give that another look through as you're working through the quiz if you have not yet attempted the quiz for this week. So I like to start every class by checking in to see if anybody has any questions about anything we talked about last class or anything about the course in general before we get rolling. If you do have questions at any point, please let me know. Or if you'd like me to go back to anything, please let me know too. So let's go ahead and get into it. So when it comes to small group communication and working effectively when we're in a group setting, one of the ways that we can think about this is in terms of occupying 4 different stages. And we might think about small groups a lot in more of a professional or work context, right? We may be part of a team or extracurricular or activity, but we also do small group communication, even if it's just for connection. Maybe we're part of a philosophy club, or maybe we're part of a D&D guild, right? And we enjoy doing things like that for fun. Generally speaking, regardless of the group, it's generally moving between the 4 different stages. One way to think about this is to think about it like a sports team, right? So you're involved in athletics on campus. There's a good chance that your group has moved through these 4 different stages, right? The first stage is what's called the forming stage. That is putting the band together, right? Getting the group together, working, able to collaborate and work effectively with one another. One way you think about this is a lot of sports, right? You have a draft where people are being put onto teams, people get moved around in teams, right? Maybe Maybe you are in fantasy sports and you're creating a fantasy team, right? It's the process of getting those people in a room. Maybe you got drafted to be one of the jurors, right? So that's an example here of how you get put in a setting that allows you to work together with a group. I recently started watching a show on Amazon called The Boys, right, which is kind of interesting take where it's the superheroes are evil and it's a group of people who are trying to basically stop or kill the evil superheroes. It's kind of fun, but it's an example of how, like, in the early stages, in a lot of film, media depiction, there's a lot of distrust. People are yelling, people are arguing, people don't have collaboration. We see a lot of representation of that on the screen, right? Groups who have to work together, right? This example of 12 Angry Men is one of the jurors trying to develop trust and build relationships with each other. So early on, we oftentimes feel distrust, we feel anger or uncertainty around other people. How many people have ever heard of uncertainty reduction theory? Okay, 2 or 3 people, coincidentally, people who have taken interpersonal with me, right? So this is a major theory in communication. Uncertainty reduction theory deals with the idea that we use communication as a way of reducing cognitive and behavioral uncertainty. One way to easily think about this theory is to think about stranger danger, right? If we don't know somebody, we're really anxious about them because we can't predict what they're going to do, right? Are they going to suddenly pull a knife on us on the street, right? Or are they somebody that is going to take the credit and not put in the work on a group assignment, right? That is one of the challenges that we experience early on. So we use communication, we share, we get to know, we provide details with each other as a way of breaking down those barriers. As we spend more time with people, we've developed trust, we become more aware of how they behave, right? We develop patterns that we are able to identify in other people. So uncertainty reduction theory is happening at this forming stage, building relationships with other people. How many people have ever done an escape room? Okay, so a few of you, right? So the premise of an escape room, if you're not familiar, right, is that you and a group of people are put inside a room and you're given a set amount of time, usually an hour. The room has a lot of puzzles and you typically have to resolve the puzzles and figure it out within that time. Fun fact, I actually worked for an escape room for a while. I was one of the hosts and it was a zombie themed one. And I was like the mad scientist whose experiment went wrong and now there's a zombie in the middle of the room. It was kind of fun. But I bring this up because a lot of companies and organizations actually have their team members participate in escape rooms because it's a chance for the group members to form, right? To build relationships with each other, to problem solve with each other, to build trust with each other, and so on. So it's interesting to see the icebreakers, the activities, and the strategies that might be used as a way of addressing the concerns that members of a group might have about each other early on. Next, we have the storming stage, right? And the storming stage is generally where the group members really have to hash things out, right? If you're a part of a group, oftentimes you experience a lot of conflict, disagreement, distrust. Perhaps there are egos and people who are competing with one another. Maybe you rejoin the team and there is kind of almost like a power jockeying going on about who's going to be the team captain, right? So the storming stage is about resolving and figuring out and sorting out the differences that you and the other members of the group have. You want to work effectively together, you've got to get those issues resolved, you've got to move forward and find a way to work effectively. Perhaps that means divvying up tasks. Maybe you're doing a presentation for a class, you have to work together to figure out who's doing which parts of the presentation. So person A is working on the first 3 slides, person B is working on the last 3 slides, and person C is going to create an outline, right? So figuring out, developing trust and developing those feelings that might bubble and create an even greater conflict later are important to address at this stage. Number 3 is the performing stage, right? So if we think about this like athletics or extracurriculars, right? That's the stage where you go out and do the thing. You've been doing practice, you've been coached, you've been working with your teammates, and now you have the game. You're doing the maneuvers and strategies that you've been coached to do, and you're executing them, right? So this is where you and your group are achieving the goals. Again, this could be more recreational. Maybe you're a part of just a club, maybe a book group, and you're talking about the book, right? You're taking the time to do what it is that the group has been brought together to do. And then at the very end, we have adjourning, right? Adjourning is generally when the group breaks apart. This can be both short and long term. Perhaps in the short term, you're working with the team and you've wrapped up for the day and you're going to meet again next week. Or perhaps you're done for the season and you're graduating and you're no longer going to be a part of that group, right? Group composition can change, people can come and go, but generally speaking, the full dynamic of the small group is open. Oftentimes, we might form friends with members of the group, right? Maybe they're coworkers, team members that we continue to have a good relationship with, even if we're not a part of that group. So it doesn't mean that you all scatter and have nothing to do with each other, rather that the dynamic of that group has ended in its current state. So we move through these different stages, whether we're task-oriented, whether we're recreational, regardless, we're participating in groups and using communication as a way to move forward. Additionally, we move through different stages in our relationship to the group as a member, right? So oftentimes we might start as a potential member. So perhaps there's a club or activity that you're interested in here at EOU, but you want to get a lay of the land. Maybe there's a philosophy club or poetry club, and you decide, you know what, I'm interested in that. I'm going to observe the first meeting and learn a little bit about what's going on, right? So oftentimes at this stage, you're trying to figure out what's going on, or how many people have ever toured a campus as a prospective student? Okay. A couple of you, right? So a lot of times, if you're applying, you might explore around the campus that you're interested in going to, right? You might get a tour and so on. Then you're a new member, right? And as a new member, you oftentimes feel some challenge and responsibility. You've got to adjust as an outsider to the rules, to the expectations, to the beliefs that members of the group have, right? You're generally not somebody that people can fully trust yet, right? A lot of colleges and universities have Greek life that involves kind of hazing, right, of becoming a member. Sometimes hazing can be dangerous or even fatal. And that can be a concern with how new members become a part of the group. Sometimes there's a desire of full members for new members to prove themselves as a part of the group. So oftentimes new members feel concerned about adjusting to the norms, behaviors of the group, and sometimes they're concerned that they don't have trust from other people. Once you're a full member, you know the rules, right? You understand what's going on. You're somebody that's generally seen as a leader because you've been there for a while, right? If you're a junior or a senior on a team, there's a good chance that, you know, as a team captain or team member, you're looked to as an example for the newer members. You help to guide them, show them the ropes, and help them to feel comfortable as a part of the group, right? You're respected and trusted at that stage. A divergent member is somebody who's starting to differentiate themselves from the group, right? So we can think about these first three stages of coming together, these last three as coming apart in terms of your participation in the group. One of the top terms of the year 2022 was the term silent quitting. How many people have heard of this before? A couple of you. Silent quitting refers to the practice by which somebody might continue to do a job, but is kind of largely checked out. They might be applying to other jobs, or they might no longer be interested in the job and just doing the bare minimum, right? Silent quitting is a common practice these days of people who are dissatisfied with their work. And at that stage, people are generally saying, oh, I have to go into this meeting and talk to these people. I don't like this, right? You're focusing on the difference between you and the group that you're a part of. A marginal member might be somebody that's kind of part of the group, but is no longer really involved in the same way, right? So one example of being a marginal member is perhaps you're involved in an extracurricular in high school, but maybe sometimes you go back and you help coach as an alum, Or maybe, you help if there's a competition or field trip, you help to transport people around, right? When I graduated high school, I helped coach my speech and debate team and guide them and help them at a couple tournaments. That would be considered to be a marginal member. And then next member is no longer involved. Perhaps you've graduated, you've moved on, you've quit and done something else, right? So in addition to this, we have what are known as functional roles of group members. And if we think about a function, right, a function in this context is referring to what somebody does when they're in a group. We'll be looking at a lot of different approaches to group membership and participation, including the different roles and hats that people might put on as they participate in a group. But the functional roles, I think, are an important way for us to understand why it is that we gravitate toward particular tasks. First, we have an initiator collaborator, right? This is generally somebody who's suggesting and putting out new ideas for solving a problem, right? This is somebody who's thinking outside of the box, who is directing and proposing options and really getting gears turning on what to do. So if you think back to that 12 Angry Men example, right? The juror who observed the imprints on the nose would be an example of an initiator collaborator. It's raising this issue and bringing it to the attention of the group. Or perhaps you're in an escape room and you notice, oh, hey, there is a book here on the table and the book has a bookmark that seems to have some symbols on it. I think this might be important for us to get out of the escape room, right? So that would be an example of taking on that role. A collaborator is building off of the ideas that somebody like an initiator collaborator might have and providing examples, right? Expanding upon and developing this a little bit more, right? So we saw this in 12 Angry Men. Not only was she not wearing glasses, we're starting to unpack why, right? Maybe she didn't like her appearance when she was wearing glasses, so she chose not to have them. Or perhaps we see that there's this bookmark and it's got symbols, and we start to realize that these symbols correspond to playing cards, right? There's 4H, which is 4 of hearts, and we start to realize what's going on with this puzzle. The coordinator has a unique role of bringing things together, right? It's taking the ideas, the information, and suggestions, and really starting to put them into practice, right? This is more at the theory, brainstorming idea level. This is getting into the practice level. So at this stage, perhaps you and your group have developed ideas for a class presentation, and you say, okay, let's sit down and let's start working through the slides, right? You actually start to create the bones of the project itself, right? So maybe you're the person who starts to input different codes in the escape room based on the clue that you were given. We have the evaluator critic, right? And this is a very important role in a lot of groups. This is the person who's offering some level of judgment, who's providing pushback, who's providing constructive criticism about the ideas and work that the group is developing so far. We saw this in 12 Angry Men with the very loud juror who was talking about how he thought that the glasses issue was irrelevant and didn't really matter. Why do we care about glasses? Why do we care about these imprints on the person's notes, right? We oftentimes can think about the evaluator critic as the person who plays devil's advocate, who argues an opposing perspective and presents some ideas about how to think about something differently. This role is really important because, as we'll discuss later in the term, the issue of groupthink is a really big problem. Groupthink occurs when members of a group haven't taken the time to really think through and problem solve whatever it is that they have put out there, and what they produce might be a disaster, right? At worst, it could be a foreign policy failure that could cost lives, could start war, right? Or it could be something like a public relations disaster, an advertisement or commercial that is totally out of sync or inappropriate with what you would expect, right? Then we have the recorder, who is the person who generally documents the ideas, examples, suggestions, and cheats that the group has. Maybe in the escape room, you're the person that's taking notes, right, and observing what members of the group are pointing out. Or maybe you're jotting down and brainstorming the ideas that members of the group have brought forward. The recorder role is really important because they are the person who provides the history and background about the organization or team that you're a part of, right? I will tell you from experience that working in group settings can create a lot of he said, she said scenarios where people are doubting and questioning what happened in previous meetings. The best way to get around that is to either record your meeting or have somebody who is responsible for taking minutes, right? The recorder who takes minutes on a group meeting is able to report on what happened, and then at the next meeting, typically those minutes are voted on so that the group collectively agrees as to what occurred. So the recorder is really important. You don't want to create a whole lot of ideas and brainstorm a ton of stuff and then have the next meeting where nobody remembers what happened and you're thinking, oh, what was that idea that you had? And you're running up against the deadline, right? I want you to take a couple minutes. You don't need to turn this in, but I do recommend taking some notes for yourself, since you will be returning to this in a little bit, to think about the roles that you usually take on when you're working in a team. Again, this could be clubs, activities, it could be work, it could be other classes, it could be a family or friend groups that you're a part of. Given some of these roles, which do you find yourself gravitating toward or more likely to take on when you're in a group setting? So I'll give you a couple minutes to think about this and maybe write some notes to yourself. We'll be asking you to share these in a group in just a little bit. Anybody who'd like some more time? Great. So hang on to this, come back to it. So all of this is fine and dandy, but let's talk a little bit about some of the bad things that can happen in a group. So I have another clip from 12 Angry Men that I want to share that I think it gets at some of the ways that this can go forward. And again, please bear with me as I adjust the volume up and down for some of these changing voices over time.
All votes now in favor of approval. I don't understand you people. I mean, all these little points you keep bringing up, they don't mean nothing. You saw this kid just like I did. You're not going to tell me you believe that phony story about losing the knife and that business about being in the movies. Look, you know how these people lie. It's falling in them. I mean, what the heck? I don't have to tell you. They don't know what the truth is. And let me tell you, they don't need any real big reason to kill someone either. No, sir. They get drunk. Oh, they're real big drinkers, all of them. You know that. And bang, someone's lying in the gutter. Nobody's blaming them for it. That's the way they are, by nature. You know what I mean? Violent. Where are you going? Human life don't mean as much as the other life. Look, they're rushing it up and fighting all the time. And if somebody gets killed, so somebody gets killed, they don't care. Well, sure, there's some good things about them too. Look, I'm the first one to say that. I know the couple were okay, but that's expected, you know what I mean? Most of us like to have no feelings, they can do anything. What's going on here? I'm trying to tell you, you're making a big mistake, you people. This kid is a liar, I know it, I know all about them. Listen to me. They're no good, there's not one with any good. I mean, what's happening in here?
So at this stage, right, we have 9 jurors who now believe he's not guilty. We have this loud juror, right, who is practicing a lot of things that we would associate with very poor small group communication. Let's talk about it, right? First of all, this fellow is a dominator, right? A dominator is somebody who's controlling the discussion and not allowing other people to collaborate. One of the things that makes small group communication good is the idea that we can bounce ideas off each other, build ideas off each other, and share information that we just couldn't do if we were on our own. If you stifle that and have one person in the group who's dominating the conversation, interrupting people mid-sentence and making it about them, well, you've taken away all of the things that make small group communication unique. So there are dynamics where you might have a leader or captain of a group who's talking a little bit more, right, and occupying more space, and that's fine. The trick, though, is to balance that out with the dynamics that you want of small group members participating. In particular, if you're a facilitator, oftentimes you want to speak as little as possible. You want to guide the discussion. You might manage time and help people work through ideas. But at the end of the day, your goal is to help other people to talk with each other rather than talking for others. So that's one big issue. Another big issue are people who are recognition seekers, right? Who make it less about working together and more about the personal accomplishments or seeking out achievement for yourself in the group, right? Trying to throw other people under the bus to get what you want. So a recognition seeker might be somebody who's just joined a college athletic team and talks at length about how they were the state finalists before they came here to EOU, right? And sometimes it's great to share about your accomplishments for the sake of ethos, for credibility, for building trust, but it's a balancing act between that and distracting the conversation to make it about you, right? So creating credibility, but also creating collaboration are 2 things that are very important to do. We also have what's known as a special interest pleaser, right? Who is making the discussion more about their own agenda and goals rather than the goals of the group. Right, so this is somebody who gets off task. Maybe give you an extreme example. This is somebody who's really into multi-level marketing, right, and wants to interrupt a work meeting to talk about how you all should buy Cutco knives, or perhaps there are a lot of bath products that you should purchase, right? So in those settings, making it about something else that had nothing to do with the group's work and goals would be an example here of special interest group. The fellow we just saw in that clip is an example of a blocker, right? So it's good to have somebody who's devil's advocate, who disagrees, who pushes back, who gets you to question your ideas. But at the end of the day, if all this person is doing is being a stick in the mud, is not listening, right, or paying attention to other people in the group, then that person is dragging the discussion down and preventing the ability to reach a good solution on an issue. Right? So a blocker who's not responding to the changing needs of other people is a negative pattern. In 12 Angry Men, kind of toward the end, right, this juror eventually breaks down and says not guilty, not because he believes that the person is innocent, but he recognizes that they've been in there for hours, they're exhausted, they want to go home, and that he's the one that's halting their ability to reach consensus. Lastly, there's a joker or clown, right? Humor, levity, all of that stuff is great. It can really help to break up the meeting, but using that in a way that's distracting and going on tangents, right? Maybe you're working on an assignment and choose to share like a YouTube video or TikTok you think is really funny, hurts your ability to work together effectively in a group, right? We might also think about how there's other practices that group members can do too. For instance, somebody who's largely absent, either physically, mentally, or both, who doesn't really participate or finds themselves very involved in the group. That's a challenge too. So I want you, in a similar way to before, to be thinking about some of the patterns that you risk falling into. Maybe you've taken on one of these roles in the past, or maybe you find that you risk fulfilling one of these roles if you're not careful. So nobody's perfect in a small group setting. What are the patterns or practices of these that you might risk falling into? I'll give you a couple minutes to think about this. Anybody who would like some more time on this? So what I'm going to be doing now is splitting you into small groups yourselves. And what I'd like you to do in your groups is to share the functional roles that you found yourselves most likely to take on. So which of these that you find yourself leaning toward, and then finding, what similarities or differences you're noticing in these roles. And then secondarily, what are the negative group member patterns that you risk falling into? Share some of those and talk a little bit about what can be done to address some of these patterns too. So you do not need to turn it in, but I will be asking each group to have one person share some of the things that came from your discussion. So let's do a group of 1, 2, 3, and 4 over here on this side. We'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 here in the middle. And we will do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 here on this side. So take some time to move over to your group, chat a little bit about the functional roles and behaviors that you find yourself gravitating toward, and be ready to share some of the things that came from your discussion. First of all, Ben, and you might remind yourselves of your names as we're getting to know each other.
And what's your point? Ben. Yeah. Sure. Okay, so yeah, for my positive ones, I usually start off as initiator, get the ball rolling, things to start with. And after that, I generally switch over to reporter once things are going on. Remember around positive. I definitely. Negative, probably your secret walker, because I do think devil's advocate a fair bit. If that's too much asshole, and then recognition seeker, ego.
Okay, yeah.
So. I've been with this for 20 years. Selling magic cards. Well, you need to stop happening, which is very challenging. So I tend to my businesses like big picture guys. Business partner to do data initiatives is not good at that at all. Coordinator as well. I'm really big on like communications, have business meetings, do everyone can put do sometimes like get stuff I don't wait, right? On the negatives, special interest pleaser, I get semi-attached to my right. So it takes a while to break through some of that sometimes. Joker, clown, working people like for 17 hours a day for 5 days to work up like a county. So I also usually in groups, all of the people who speak style, beat out, obviously. As for the negative, I usually call for the dominator category because especially as a topic that I like discussing, I want to get all of my ideas. Especially my rubrics. I'm pretty familiar with that. Strengths and motivators. Grades. Personally, we have the ideas. About other people's ideas and how.
Give you about 2 more minutes. Continue to your discussion here.
Need to like get back on certain.
I do a vote. I don't know, man. I feel like it's so. I will. Hell yeah. It's not even graded. It's still like, oh man. Well, I just say like, but I just think that's what it sounded like it was. That one person to say their names. So like, I'll just say mine.
Okay, take another minute to finish up and make sure you have one person from your group who will share some of the things that came up through your discussion.
Take a minute to get back to the swing thing. Psychology. So something like that's my original major, and then I did an internal business. Those were the started dispensary. It's great. So the psychotherapy leads. Do a PhD program, do research. So it's very lots of benefits there. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like it's crazy how effective it is. Oh yeah. I'm pretty proud of policy like where everything should probably be equal to a lot of research. I think it will. Like my buddy's captain actually making it really long.
All right.
Oh, it makes people want to do it more, man.
So let's hear from the groups in regards to some of the things you noticed about the functional roles, as well as some of the negative behaviors that emerged among members of your group. So let's start over here with this group.
Okay, yeah. So, I'm sorry. What can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So what were some of the functional roles that you all found amongst your group?
All right. Yeah, we got a pretty good mix going here. We have 2 initiators here, he and I also fall to the evaluator or the recorder, yeah, category. And he's an evaluator, and I'm sorry, I didn't. Oh, you're good. Coordinator. Coordinator.
Okay.
Yeah, great. And then for negative ones, we found that we were more likely to be making jokes, and then I really like to play devil's advocate. So,
Yeah.
That can be a bit of a negative with the blocker if you take it too far.
Yeah, right. So it's always the balancing act is, are you disagreeing and presenting a different viewpoint for the sake of helping a group improve, or are you doing it to grandstand on your own opinion, to halt discussion and to center it on yourself, right? That's a challenging balancing act to navigate, and also it's challenging to figure out when the right time to stop or abstain or support a consensus might be. So that's something we'll be getting into more, but appreciate the variation you all shared amongst the group. How about here in the middle?
We all were talked about being like collaborators or initiators, and then one of us talked about being the evaluator. And then for the negative roles, a lot of people talked about like a lot of us were special interest groups. Talked about having our own agendas, and then a few of us talked about being like the Joker.
Yeah, it's challenging, right? Because when we're in a group, we do have our own interests, and sometimes those interests can push back against the group interests or some of the interests of other people. You want the group to succeed, but you would like to be the team captain, right? So trying to navigate those differences and figure out how you can articulate your own interests and concerns in a group appropriately, while also making sure not to derail the group is an important challenge that we'll be looking into more as well. And then how about over here?
We have a fair difference of what kind of values we were, but most of us would want to expand on ideas given by others, depending on what it was. If they didn't agree, then they would become the critics. The negatives, there are a lot of there was a blocker and
Yeah, so for the negative, we did like a lot of people said like the Joker, clowns, talking about like the importance of situations and just having fun, kind of goofing off, so working together to reach a consensus with the group. And then what can be done to address that is sort of just having like someone in place, sort of like, okay, that was funny, let's get back on track.
Right. So yeah, I appreciate your group sharing that variation. And again, it's a balancing act of, it's good to have fun, it's good to have some levity, right? But having somebody who's designated to help the group move on and get to more pressing issues is important, right? Or sometimes a group meeting goes so well that it ends early and there's space to have fun, have a bit more social time at the end. Or some groups are set up so that there's time like before the meeting starts to socialize and spend together. So there's ways to kind of get around those issues too. But I really appreciate the groups pointing to some of these patterns. There's a lot of variation in roles, which I think will be great as we work through group activities in this class. We'll have the chance to lean on each other through all of those too. So to wrap up for today, we talked about small group communication in terms of membership, in terms of practices that people can do, some of the different stages and some of the challenges that we might feel as we're working in these different groups. On Friday, we're going to be looking at some of the key paradigms, ways of thinking about and exploring small group communication as well. So I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon, and I will see you again for Friday's class.